Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Season of Heathens, where I share my experiences from my time in a religious cult, the independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church. For 10 years, everything I did was controlled to the last minor detail. I am free now, and I strive to live a life of kindness, authenticity, and peace on my own terms. I hope my channel can help others validate their own experiences and encourage healing. Today we're talking about fundies and abuse. This video contains descriptions of abuse that may be harmful or triggering to some viewers, so please feel free to click off in the interest of self-care. I'll catch you in the next video. So how does the church handle abusive situations? To put it bluntly, if the abuser is the headship, they simply don't. God ordained him as the head of the home, and his word is law. It's not anyone's business how he runs his home. That's between him and God. When it comes to disciplining children with corporal punishment, they encourage it outright from the pulpit. In the cult, beating children is always justified, and they consider it their duty to prevent their children from going to hell. Many, many sermons I witnessed were about how God wants you to beat the shit out of your kids. The preacher would frequently demonstrate how to do it properly on a doll or an awkward teen volunteer, usually their own kids. The church teaches that babies are inherently evil. Yes, you heard right, evil. Due to original sin and need corporal punishment to drive the devil out of them. I've heard of spanking 4-month-old babies who wouldn't sleep through the night. This is especially heartbreaking because it teaches the child that asking for help brings fear and pain. Babies advocate for themselves by crying. It's the only way they can communicate. They eventually learn to stop asking, which is the goal of most fundies. Their frame of thinking is, I will give you what you need when I decide. You don't get to tell me what to do. A family I knew of was fond of blanket training. This was originated by Michael Pearl, a Neanderthal cosplaying as a man of God. The idea is to put a baby on a blanket and wait for them to crawl off it, at which time they get spanked or smacked. Eventually, the baby learns to stay within the boundaries of the blanket because they associate it with pain. To avoid mandatory reporting, and to also make corporal punishment seem less horrible, fundies like to use code words. I often heard the phrase, rule of thumb. This relates to using a rod, the maximum width of your thumb, to whip a child on their bare buttocks and legs. Flexibility is key to minimize bruising, so paint sticks were common along with wooden spoons. The same family who practiced blanket training also bragged about how they had spanking sticks within reach in every room. One of their kids was severely disabled from birth, and even he was not exempt from it. This is a large part of the reason why fundies mistrust healthcare providers, who are mandatory reporters. Fundies will never go to an appointment alone, no matter how old they are. Mothers or sister moms, usually the latter depending on the size of the family, will always be present to speak for them in case the child says something to raise concern about their way of life. The men of the church often joked about punishing their children like it was water cooler banter. To them, it was a battle of wills, and they seemed to enjoy the challenge. There's a Bible verse that states, "Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die," was frequently spoken and seemed to be a favorite. I always noticed they would linger on the word beat, almost as if they enjoyed it. My ex's dad had a wooden paddle awkwardly decorated with painted flowers that hung in the kitchen. It also had a name written on it, something stupid like Rod of Correction, with a Bible verse, as if that somehow made it better. This was not uncommon in fundy homes. Breaking the will of a child seemed like a sporting event. I've heard of some pretty horrific ways fundies in the church would discipline their children. Kneeling on rice for hours and wall sits until the child is crying were two of the worst I remember. Yelling or crying out while getting whipped meant more spankings because it was a sign of willful disobedience. I still can't wrap my head around that one. Crying when you're hurting is disobedience. Raising children in an environment of fear only makes them better at lying and avoiding punishment. Years and years ago, my oldest took my iPod so she could watch My Little Pony videos on YouTube, which were considered worldly and forbidden for her to watch. She kept it for a day or two, watching videos at night when everyone was sleeping, before she buried it in the trash for fear of being found out. At the time, I just figured I'd lost the thing. The story still makes me laugh when she tells it, and I can appreciate how clever she was at hiding it from me. So, what does abuse look like for fundy wives? To clarify, I believe abuse can come from anyone, men or women, But the way the hierarchy is built in fundie churches, wives abusing husbands just doesn't happen as often. Women are groomed from a young age to walk on eggshells and obey male authority. Fear of hell or physical punishment keeps them quiet and submissive. When problems in the marriage come up, the wife is usually asked if she has any sin in her life. Focus from the problem quickly turns to the woman's shortcomings. She is told to ensure her own walk of faith is clean before she can accuse her husband of sin. Is she praying enough? Has she given her burdens and sins to God? It's interesting to note that bitterness is a common topic at women's Bible studies, where they're told that God won't forgive them if they don't forgive their husbands. Don't nag. Don't be a dripping faucet of contention. You must always be happy to see him when he comes home. Always make yourself available in the marital bed, and keep your appearance neat and feminine. Withholding sex is only acceptable if both parties agree, according to the Bible. To do so on your own is allowing the devil a stronghold for your husband to find sex elsewhere. While the church preaches accountability, there's always this subtext of it being the woman's fault if the man strays. Men are continuously infantilized when it comes to taking personal responsibility. I've heard a preacher's wife say, "Boys will be boys," in reference to grown men who don't clean up after themselves or get lazy in their marriages or fatherhood. Accepting your husband as another child while making it look like he's doing all the work is the song and dance many wives play to keep peace in the home. Conversely, women are infantilized when it comes to intelligence, capabilities, and decision-making. Everything must have the stamp of approval from the headship, otherwise his fragile masculinity is threatened, and she is no longer under God's protection due to her rebellion. Because feeling any other emotion than keeping sweet is a sin in their eyes, the years-long buildup of resentment and anger can cause a woman to lash out, giving their husbands an opportunity to point fingers and say that she's the abuser. She's the one stepping outside of God's will. This is something I experienced personally. I was given useless advice with no substance, vague Bible verses to pray on, and no real tools to improve the situation for me or my kids. Giving it to God and letting it go was useless advice. Tell me the steps. If I could have packed up my burdens and walked it to heaven myself, I would have done it 1,000 times. My ex ignored any and all advice from the pastor, but was quick to call him whenever I stepped out of line. To their credit, the pastor and his wife have since rescinded some of their harmful views since I divorced my ex. I think now they understand that being called to ministry doesn't give them the tools they need to confront and counsel abuse. They now tell their congregation that if they even think there's any abuse going on in the families, they will not hesitate to call the authorities. This may seem like common sense to outsiders, but it's a big deal in insular churches that promote obedience no matter what from children and wives. They simply don't like outsiders, and have reason to be afraid because they know what they're doing is wrong. As an aside, the pastor and his wife were the only people to apologize to me after the dust had settled when my marriage imploded. While I no longer attend that church or any other, I still speak to them from time to time. I may not agree with their views, but I also understand that growth tends to happen in small steps. What they do affects their community, and they learn from my situation instead of pretending it never happened. Every day, abuse is ignored and even encouraged in churches across the globe. While I didn't grow up in a fundamentalist home, it was strict, and I was frequently spanked and slapped for minor things. I remember how it made me feel, and how fearful I became of saying or doing anything wrong. When my ex was finally removed from our home, I decided that spanking would no longer be a part of how I raised my kids. Never would I touch them in anger, only in love, comfort, and assurance. Since making that decision, I can say that I've never had a problem, and living by that ideal has served me well. Of course, my kids make mistakes as people do, and I try to teach them as best as I can. They have no need to sneak around and lie, although they still do sometimes, but will generally admit it to me quickly. Also, it's true that Mom knows everything. I refuse to run my home with fear and violence. My children deserve better, and I'm proud to say that they are all well-adjusted and compassionate humans. My bedroom door is always open, and the younger ones consider watching TV in my room a treat. I'm grateful that I can provide a place of peace and safety for them. As their mother, that's the very least I can do. I brought them into this world without their consent, and they deserve a strong and safe place to learn and grow until they're ready to explore the world on their own. I didn't have that reassurance growing up, and it directly led to my being sucked into the IFBC cult mindset later in life because I was raised to believe I needed to earn the love of others. According to the church, Jesus came to overturn the old laws and show, by example, grace, unconditional love, and acceptance, not blind obedience fueled by fear. I've yet to see a Bible verse where Jesus whips a child. That's all for today. I hope you learned something new or that it validated your own experience with religious abuse. If you enjoyed my content and would like to hear more, please like and subscribe. It helps me reach viewers who could be helped by listening in. Speaking truth is the first step to healing. Your story is my story, and those of countless others. If you would like to share yours, email me at seasonofheathens@gmail.com. All submissions are kept anonymous unless otherwise requested and may be shared on my channel. Thank you for listening in today. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next time.